And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for being here today on the big program. Lots to get to, lots to talk about today. Big executive order signing, lots of pomp and circumstance, lots of attention, pats on the back, lots of Trump, wanting attention. I don't know what the summit was over. There was a vaccine summit, evidently, where the CEOs of the two companies that are making the vaccine didn't show up, were invited, said, no, I don't think so. Also, one of the chief scientists on the Operation Warp Speed program there, not quite sure what the executive order does. And look, I'm glad that someone a lot smarter than me was going, what exactly is this? What's the point here? There is no point. The point is, hey, pay some attention to me. Thank me. And that's what this is. This is a me grab. Because today you had Joe Biden saying in the first 100 days, we're going to get 100 million people vaccinated, which is an incredibly huge undertaking. But I'm still trying to figure out what the big shindig was about, other than waste a couple of taxpayer dollars, having a little party, a little love fest. The big news today, and I still don't like Pat Toomey. I'm never gonna like Pat Toomey. Sorry, he's just I find him to be not a good senator. I was never a fan of his when he was a congressman. Certainly. I'll tell you when I was a fan of his. There was a very short period of time when he was a bar owner in Allentown. They were the first place in Allentown to have the Sunday ticket, if you remember, way back in the old days where you could go to and watch the football games. I liked him then. As soon as he got into politics, not so much, and then even worse in the Senate. But today, he comes out and he says, look, it's completely unacceptable for Trump to be pressuring state legislatures to overturn voting results. Completely unacceptable. He says it's not going to work and the president should give up trying to get the legislatures to overturn the results. And it's not going to work. And it was never going to work. And this is where Trump, I think, actually believed it could. I might be able to pull it out. This was the plan in 2016 anyway. Might be able to get those Republicans, all the people who've been following me like sheep, to basically throw the Constitution away and their oath of office away to blindly follow me. And it's interesting that Toomey has come out and said this. Now, do I give Toomey credit for it? No, he's not running for a re-election. If he really wanted to impress me, he could call up Mitt Romney and say, hey, Mitt, we're going to start caucusing with the Democrats and take power away from Mitch McConnell. He could do that, and he could immediately begin moving the ball towards getting this over with. But that's not going to happen. Now, the other big news today is the U.S. Supreme Court tossed out the Pennsylvania Republicans' lawsuit to block the certification of Pennsylvania's electors. And, it's one of those things where you go, it's just amazing how many people will follow the leader. And, yesterday there was a letter that went out from the Pennsylvania Republicans where 60 of them signed on, 60 state representatives, 60 elected officials. My state representative, Barbara Gleim, whom I'm hoping that whoever runs against her in 2 years, this is front and center, the cowardice of this moment. But she's standing with the other 59 to call on the Pennsylvania congressional delegation to reject the state electors. Basically saying 2.5 million of us here in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania don't matter. Half the state, well, more than half because Donald Trump lost Pennsylvania, but more than half of the state don't matter. And what's going to be interesting for me over the next couple of days is to see how the MAGA cult, how much love they're going to put towards the five on the Supreme Court. How much love Clarence Thomas is now going to get, who was a Tea Party icon. How much Alito is going to get. How much Kavanaugh and Gorsuch and Amy Covid Barrett's going to get. How much love and affection they're going to get from the MAGA hat wearing nitwits who are just screaming and whining and complaining. I mean, the collective whine with this crowd is, it is strong with this crowd. And I saw this video. Right Wing Watch put out this video of this self-help guru. He calls himself. He's a self-help guru, and he's blathering on about he and others and the rest of the MAGA basement dwellers were going to do everything. Everything. He said somewhere between 74 and 80 million American patriots are more than prepared to do everything. I mean, blanking everything to protect Donald Trump. And I'm going, really? You're really willing to go to war for Donald Trump? You're willing to shoot your neighbor? Because I'd like a definition of what everything means. Because I'll tell you, immediately my mind goes to, these people have been telling us for years that they've been stockpiling arms, and I know tons of people who have been fantasizing about shooting people in the middle of the road. Is that what he means by everything? I mean, my grandfather always said, don't let your mouth write a check your behind can't cash. And this is one of those moments where everything, because my mind goes to some pretty dark places when you start going everything. And I'll tell you, there's not been a politician I've been willing ever to do that for, because this is about a politician. Understand, there's no evidence of voter fraud. There's not. There are the regular irregularities that you see in every election, but there is no systemic voter fraud that they can prove. And look, Rudy Giuliani has had the floor for a very long time. In fact, way too long, to be honest. And there's nothing there at all. Now, look, I know some of these kooks who, I'll show you, and, puff up their chest. As my grandfather also said, no matter how big and bad you are, always someone bigger and badder. And usually in the places you least expect it. And this is one of those moments where you go, radical right-wing MAGA hat wearing, wearing my flag, loudmouths. If you really wanted that kind of a response in the streets, we're in a scary moment, and you're pushing us. And the Republican Party is pushing us. Look, I get some guy in his basement screaming and carrying on. I get that. But the Republican Party of Arizona? Evidently the guy who calls himself the organizer of the Stop the Steal movement, he tweeted out that he was willing to die. He was willing to die for Donald Trump. He was willing to die for the fight that would keep Donald Trump in office. And I'm personally going, what exactly has Trump done other than, promote, the racist nonsense that we've been seeing? What's he actually done that brings that kind of loyalty? So this guy, he tweets out, I'm willing to give my life for this fight. And the Arizona Republican Party tweets out, are you? Which you go, what? This is the Republican Party of the state of Arizona. And then they follow it up with a quote from Rambo. With freaking Rambo. This is what we do. Who we are. Live for nothing or die for something. It's my best Rambo voice. Which is bad. Just like this. I mean, really bad. And understand that, I know people like the guy who's all blathering, all boastful, who, when you poke him in the chest, backs down immediately. This is one of those weird moments where it's crazy to me. Because, again, there isn't any evidence of widespread voter fraud. There is nothing. And, it's just plain crazy to see these people acting the way that they are. And like I said, I expect that from, some guy in his basement. I don't expect it from a major political party. But then again, you look at what happened today. A Republican representative from West Virginia, a guy named Alex Mooney, he has put forth a resolution condemning lawmakers, condemning them for telling Donald Trump he should concede. I don't even know really where to go with that, other than this is really a sign of a party that's in major dysfunction. Now, Mooney, obviously one of the Freedom Caucus guys, one of the extreme Tea Party types. I would say even the Tea Party today looks calm compared to the MAGA hats. And, we've had Joe Walsh on the program, who was a big Tea Party guy. Even he's saying off the rails. And he's even gone, I'm sorry. I screwed this up. We led the train in the wrong direction. And if that's not bad enough, you have the Attorney General of Texas. And again, I don't know what it is about Texas, but the Attorney General there is always looking for some free PR. Evidently, he's mad about the Supreme Court not picking up the Pennsylvania case. So he's decided to file a lawsuit asking the Supreme Court to block Georgia, Wisconsin, Michigan, and yes, Pennsylvania, who the court just refused to hear Pennsylvania's case, to not certify. I mean, does this rise to the level of death protest too much? Does this come to the level of the point, please? Now, look, every expert that I've talked to, every expert that I've read on election fraud said there's nothing here. And I'm struggling with it. I'm struggling with the are we this dim? Is half the country this dim that they would literally follow a cult leader? Now, I did see a really incredible editorial in a newspaper. I think it was out in Seattle. And I just had to read it. A letter to the editor. It's titled "The Election Conspiracy." A guy named Larry Holm from Seattle wrote this, and I just thought it was fantastic. I said, there's now a growing body of evidence of a vast conspiracy to steal the election from President Trump. Officials at the Department of Homeland Security have confirmed that more than 80 million people conspired to steal the election by voting for Joe Biden. An FBI investigation has determined that planning for the conspiracy began nearly 2 years ago. And it was organized by people at the highest levels of the Democratic Party, including Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren, Pete Buttigieg, Cory Booker, Amy Klobuchar, and of course, Kamala Harris and Joe Biden. The FBI has videotape evidence of public recruitment events where these shameless leaders openly asked for people to vote for them. Even worse, these diabolical co-conspirators recruited over 73 million people to vote for President Trump just to create the appearance of a free and fair election. And then the coup de grace. They had the audacity to enlist election officials from all over the country, including many unwitting Republicans, to count all the votes. A conspiracy on this scale is unprecedented in the history of our country. And I just read that, I'm going, that's beautiful. You've turned just a regular election and now it's a conspiracy. And it sounds like, oh my God, it's a conspiracy. They actually went out and they organized people to vote against Donald Trump. That's a conspiracy. And to the MAGA hats, it is. Because they don't understand the basic premise of our electoral system. They don't understand that you cast your ballot, somebody counts it, and the one who gets the most votes wins. I'm literally dumbfounded at this. How is it possible that the guy who gets the most votes, 7 million freaking more votes, wins. How's that possible? How is it possible the guy with the most votes wins? How is it possible? I mean, seriously, how is it possible that the guy with 7 million votes wins? Oh, because I get it. I do get it. Because the guy who lost by 3 million votes the last time did win. That's right. You're used to losing, but winning. The Republican Party has always been the party of failing upward. So am I surprised? Not even a little bit. And this is where entitlement, this is where I agree with a lot of conservatives about participation awards. These are people who have never won anything in their lives, evidently not won a presidential election recently, and yet they somehow feel emboldened and entitled to be in charge and in power. And that's what this comes back to. So all of these people who are screaming and calling for revolution and we're going to do everything, I wish their mothers would just smack them. Because these are kids clearly who did not get smacked as children. And they're acting as such as adults. So mom, this is where we need a Moms Rising. Take your children to the woodshed. It's patriotic. Oh, jeez. Again, I come back to this, and it's all fun and games. It's all joke. But understand, these people are serious about this. This guy who was blathering on about he'll do anything was serious. And he believes in his mind he's willing to do anything. And when you start talking like that, and you get people who, well, they got nothing left to lose, it becomes dangerous for everybody. And while, I do find some of these people comical, I do find the mental health crisis that we have in this country, which is the inability to accept reality, as something dangerous and something that, policymakers on some level have to address. And it really should start with the leadership of the Republican Party, because none of these people are patriots. None of these people honor and defend the Constitution. These people are whiners and children, and they need to be treated as such. And come next election, we need to be starting to boot all of them out. I'd love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Quick break. Right back.
Nothing more American than workers standing up, and the union gives a voice to win. On the Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1941. That was the day 18 supporters of the Socialist Workers' Party were sentenced in the first Smith Act trial. Earlier that summer, 29 militants had been targeted and arrested for their leadership of the events in Minneapolis during the 1930s. They led the 1934 Teamsters strike that made Minneapolis a union town, successfully confronted the fascist Silver Shirts in 1938, and led a WPA strike the following year. By 1941, federal agents were raiding SWP offices in Minneapolis and St. Paul, seizing boxes of documents, books, pamphlets, and other materials. The prosecution alleged the 29 had conspired to advocate the violent overthrow of the federal government. The defendants insisted that advocating class struggle to achieve a peaceful transition to socialism was not the equivalent of a violent overthrow. They added the trial was a government witch hunt bent on suppressing their First Amendment rights. 6 were released, another 5 were acquitted, but the remaining 18 were sentenced to between 12 and 16 months in jail. Dozens of CIO unions, including the UAW, the USWA, the URW, and the UE, all rallied to the defense of the convicted militants. The ACLU, central in the defense case, now mounted the appeals campaign. They failed to overturn the convictions, and the 18 surrendered to authorities 2 years later to begin serving their sentences. For historian Donna Haverty-Stack, the case showed how far the Roosevelt administration went to prosecute political dissent, even to the point of targeting the labor liberal left. The act would be repealed in 1952. And hundreds of convictions under the act would finally be reversed as unconstitutional by 1957.
Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So the North Carolina Department of Labor, they say that they're not going to impose any additional regulation on employers in the state to help keep workers safe from the coronavirus. And according to a November 9th letter from the North Carolina Department of Labor Commissioner, Sherry Berry, she writes, while I am not dismissing the tragic deaths that have occurred as a result of this virus, statistically, she writes, the virus has not been proven likely to cause death or serious physical harm from the perspective of an occupational hazard. So if you get it on the job, it wasn't that, not a big deal. Not a big deal. And I love the fact that she says, yeah, well, it only really affects those old people. And those old people they're not really in the workplace. So it's not really a big deal. And this is somebody who's been elected like 5 terms. But I guess I shouldn't be surprised because we still have Mitch McConnell and the Republicans hell-bent on an immunity shield for all employers across the country as the pound of flesh to get any help for people during this pandemic. So again, I am not surprised, but here to share some thoughts on, the head of the commissioner of the Department of Labor there in North Carolina. I've asked Mary B. McMillan to come talk with us. She's the president of the North Carolina AFL-CIO. Mary B., thanks for taking time for us.
Oh, thanks, Rick. Appreciate the opportunity to be on the show.
So, not a big deal because, it only affects those old people and they don't really work. So, no big deal.
Yeah, it is crazy that our labor commissioner is saying that COVID is not a workplace safety issue when we're in the midst of a global pandemic with an airborne virus and we have essential workers who are working hard every day to provide us with needed goods and services, endangering their lives often in close contact with other coworkers, with the public. And she's saying it's not a workplace hazard, even though, 280,000 people have died in the U.S. and here in North Carolina, 5,600 people have died. There's been at least 300 clusters identified in the workplace. So, I would like the commissioner to say that it's not a workplace hazard to the nurses, the firefighters, all the first responders, grocery clerks, and meat processing workers who have gotten sick. Say that to the families of the workers who have died.
Yeah, this is one of those moments where, as a union guy, I say this now more than ever, you need the protections that labor unions can help give you in the workplace by negotiating for these conditions, because evidently our laws aren't going to help us, and people like Sherry Berry sure as hell not going to help anybody.
You're absolutely right. Our workers that have the benefit of a union, we've seen unions go to bat to make sure that workers have the proper protective equipment, that social distancing guidelines are enforced in the workplace, that folks have paid sick leave so that if they're feeling sick, they can stay home and still earn an income. But unfortunately, here in North Carolina, one of the least unionized states in the country, there are hundreds of thousands of workers who don't have the benefit of a union. And so they need a watchdog, somebody looking out for them, because too many employers aren't doing what they need to do to protect workers. And unfortunately, here in North Carolina, our labor commissioner, who's charged with protecting worker safety, could care less about it. She's been in office 20 years, and she has been completely derelict in her duties to take care of workers. This is really like an exclamation point in her 20-year tenure, just putting the point on it that she does not give a damn about worker safety.
Yeah, but here's the scary part to me is, this is, you got Mitch McConnell and now Steve Mnuchin coming out saying the only way that there's going to be another stimulus package is if there's a robust, and I love the way they use the word robust, a robust shield for employers. And I'm looking at this, what's going on in your state with your labor commissioner who's not doing anything anyway. So what more do they want? How much more robust of a shield can you possibly have than we don't think it's a problem and we're not doing anything?
Yeah, I don't know what else employers could ask for. She's out of office, soon. Unfortunately, our candidate didn't get elected as labor commissioner, but we're hopeful that the new Republican labor commissioner that's coming in, he couldn't be any worse than Sherry Berry, and we're certainly going to continue to fight. This her comments came out as a result of a letter that the North Carolina AFL-CIO, along with other worker advocacy organizations, sent to her asking for a petition rulemaking, asking the Department of Labor to, create an emergency infectious disease standard, to create standards that required companies to have proper ventilation and sanitation and protective equipment. And her response was, this isn't my job because COVID is not a workplace safety hazard. And so this isn't the end of it. We're going to take this to court and continue to put pressure even after she's gone on our Department of Labor to step up and do what they need to do to protect workers in what could be the greatest occupational safety health crisis we've ever faced.
Right, but here's the thing. I guess North Carolina is one of 22 states across the country that has their own kind of like baby OSHA, right? Am I getting this right?
Right.
Yep. But isn't this a moment where the federal government would have to step in, because there's a floor here? You've got to at least do as little as the federal OSHA has done. If she's doing nothing, the little bit that OSHA has done on the national level, and it's very little, that's got to be a little bit more than nothing.
Yeah, and I think we all have high expectations for when our new administration takes effect in Washington, that hopefully the federal OSHA will create that emergency infectious disease standard, and then our state OSHA will have to fall in line because we've got to do more than what we're doing now, which is essentially nothing.
Yeah, but you come back to this and you go, what more can be done? And I remember, during the heart of this pandemic, we had a union leader from out in the western part of the country come on and talk about how, with meatpacking workers, the things that they did and negotiated with the employer to keep those workers safe, staggered schedules, bigger lunch areas, and actually brought in trailers for people to have lunch, all the PPE they're going to need. There are things you can do, common sense things that can be done. It may take a little time. It may take a little ingenuity. It may take a couple of bucks. But ultimately, if you really cared about your workforce, isn't that something you'd want to pursue?
You think so. And I mean, clearly, there are employers that are doing the right thing, many of them union employers. So, it's unfortunate that we have companies that are putting profits before people, and people are dying needlessly. If our Department of Labor had created standards early on in this pandemic about sanitation, ventilation, social distancing, proper protective equipment, then we wouldn't have seen the deaths that we've seen. We wouldn't have seen thousands of workers getting ill. It's mind-boggling and almost absurd to have a labor commissioner say this isn't a workplace safety issue, and it would be laughable except for the fact that people are dying, and they're dying needlessly.
Yeah, I've been talking to a number of people, over the last several weeks, actually several months, and we seem to be at an all-time high of, at least in my view, of people saying, maybe we do need those unions again. Maybe we do. Do you see a resurgence in organizing coming in the near future? I mean, Joe Biden has talked about doing some things on the legal front to help. If we get the senators from Georgia and legislatively something can pass. But even at this moment, I think most people are looking around going, "There's nobody looking out for me."
I absolutely see opportunities to organize. There are so many workers that have reached out to us and reached out to other unions who currently aren't represented and are saying that, their employers are going to, mark them down in their records as absent if they feel sick. They're pressuring them to come in if they don't feel well. They're not providing the proper protective equipment. Workers are fed up. They're scared. They're tired of sacrificing their health just so that the company can make a profit. And I think that this is a great opportunity for us to show the real benefits of unions and how we can work to make the workplace safer.
Yeah. And these people are going broke. I mean, the sad reality is if you don't feel well, and look, I know a lot of people who go to work sick because they can't afford to take a day off. They don't have paid sick days. They don't have vacation days. They don't have family leave time. They don't have any of that stuff. They got to go to work. They got to put food on the table, keep a roof over the kids' head, especially after this past year of all of the calamity that's gone on. And yet we still don't have a stimulus plan to help people get through, or a choice to be able to stay home and be safe, or risk going into a workplace that clearly, judging on your state commissioner, not going to keep them safe.
Right. I mean, I think we also have an opportunity to hopefully pass some of the policies that we've long fought for in the labor movement, like paid sick leave, so that all workers have some minimum number of days they could stay home if they're feeling ill. I think if we had had that, before the pandemic hit, we wouldn't have seen such an outbreak.
Yeah, we probably wouldn't have seen such an outbreak if we didn't have the person that we have sitting in the Oval Office, who knew that this was an airborne virus, and knew that this was a deadly virus, and still chose to diminish and ridicule it for the first couple of months, and look where we are now.
Yeah, it's just shameful that the inaction of our president, the inaction of our labor commissioner, and other elected officials has caused people to die.
Yeah, and I go back to the economic part of this, because the stimulus back in the spring did exactly what it was supposed to do. It saved us from what could have been a major recession. It saved people from millions of people from potentially being homeless. All of that ends the day after Christmas, which, Merry Christmas, you're homeless. Do you see us getting something passed through with this administration, with this congressional structure? Do you see anything getting through by the end of the year?
I'm holding out hope, but, we've been disappointed so many times before. And, for folks in North Carolina, our state unemployment benefits are some of the worst in the nation. Folks really needed that additional federal benefit, and to see it running out, at Christmas and no relief right now in sight is devastating for hundreds of thousands of workers in the state.
Now, we heard people like Lindsey Graham screaming that the people who are unemployed through no fault of their own were getting this extra $600, as if it was some kind of windfall, and that they were choosing to stay home because they were lazy and shiftless and wanted to cash in. And I guess one of two things: either they're lying, or they really don't know that that's not how the system works.
Yeah, I just don't understand the disdain that elected officials on the right have for unemployed workers. When we saw that here in North Carolina back in 2013, when our state legislature made the drastic cuts to our unemployment benefit systems, I mean, they thought that, people were trying to live it high on the hog on $500 a week, that was too much to provide people, and that was an incentive for people not to work. I mean, they had no idea that people, their dignity, there's no price tag on that. People want a job. They don't want to sit home and just collect that check.
But as I was saying during that whole period, if you made it optional, if we really did have that choice, I think that's where we should be pursuing, giving workers an absolute choice to say whether you're willing to go into a workplace or you're willing to stay home and protect yourself and your family with the extra couple of bucks that come along with it. Give people a true choice. And I think it would do a couple of things. I think it would raise wages a little bit, so employers would want to attract people. And it would also make employers go, maybe we should provide a safe workplace.
That's true. Maybe it would do that. I think it looks like there has to be some incentive for some employers to provide that safe workplace, unfortunately.
Yeah, I mean, I just keep coming back to this. There's so many things we could be doing. Sadly, we're not. Lastly, I wanted to get your thoughts on, you're not too far from Georgia. You're a couple of states away. Any thoughts on what's going on down there? Any predictions?
I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful that we're going to pull it out in Georgia, and we're going to see a brand new federal administration, Congress, Senate, the White House, and that we're going to see labor law reform, a higher minimum wage, and a lot more policies that are going to help working people.
Yeah, I'm hoping for all that as well, and it does come back to, if you're going to get those two Senate seats, because I would like to see something like the PRO Act passed. But sadly, you go back to the Obama administration where they had a chance to pass the Employee Free Choice Act, and that didn't happen. I fear we're having another one of those moments, possibly.
Well, we can definitely not let our guard down, and we got to hold these Democrats accountable that we elected who said they were going to support the PRO Act. And I think that we have to push to make that one of the first priorities for this administration.
Yeah. Who would you like to see as Secretary of Labor? Any favorites in this?
Anybody's going to be better than what we've got. I'll just say that.
Anybody's better than Eugene Scalia, the son of Antonin Scalia and a Walmart lawyer. You're correct. Anybody. Well, I'm not going to say anybody, but mostly anybody.
Well, I'd say anybody who's being considered under Biden would be better. That's for sure.
There you go. Any final words for folks in the workplace on how to keep themselves safe?
I would just say we got to keep fighting. Workers reach out. Let's organize. Let's get more workers into unions, and let's keep the pressure on both our federal and our state departments of labor to do right by work.
There you go. Mary B., I appreciate your time. Appreciate you coming on and talking to us and sharing some thoughts.
Thanks, Rick. Appreciate it.
As always, good stuff. Mary B. McMillan, she's the president of the North Carolina AFL-CIO. Make sure you check out their work. They're a right-to-work state with one of the lowest union densities in the country, but yet still out on the front lines, still fighting and still fighting for workers' rights. And, look, you don't get that response from this department of the commissioner of the labor department there without someone like Mary B. pushing. And I'll tell you what was the most amusing part of the whole article was the response that the woman who was the spokesperson for this Sherry Berry, the commissioner, who her name was Dolores Queensberry. She basically, her response was one line. The letter of the Commissioner Berry from Commissioner Berry speaks for itself. There's no justification. I don't want to get into it. It just speaks for itself. You read it however you need to. I want to get away. And this is, again, I'm hoping people are paying attention to how weak some of our laws are, especially in places like North Carolina. And oh, by the way, here in Pennsylvania, if you're a public sector worker, you have no OSHA protections whatsoever because we don't have an OSHA protection law in Pennsylvania. The only protection a public sector worker has in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania is being a member of a labor union. That's it. And I think it's one of those things you're going to have to remember come 2022 when Republicans are running on, we're going to be the party of the working class, when they're actually going to be the party who's going to make Pennsylvania a no rights at work state. So one of those things, tuck in the back of your head. And another reason why you should not, drop out of your union. You should sign up, be a member, and fight for those better wages, hours, conditions. Going to take a quick break. Right back. Stick around. This is The Rick Smith Show.
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. Rick Smith.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1886. That was the day 38 tradesmen met in Columbus, Ohio, to found the American Federation of Labor. There was an urgent need to form a new national organization for skilled workers. The Knights of Labor had organized workers regardless of skill. They included women and African Americans among their ranks. But they were rocked by a sharp and swift decline that year. There was an anti-labor backlash after the Haymarket incident the previous spring. Many tradesmen were looking to form a different kind of federation than the Knights had offered. Julie Green, author of Pure and Simple Politics, states the new AFL differed from the Knights of Labor on 3 core issues. First, these trade unionists were less concerned with the broad social reforms the Knights promoted. Instead, they wanted to work toward the economic concerns of their members. They didn't like the mixed assemblies the Knights insisted upon, which often included non-workers. Second, the craftsmen hoped for full autonomy of the trade unions within a loose federation. They didn't like the centralized structure of the Knights and the dominant role Terence Powderly played. Finally, they didn't like the jurisdictional subordination the Knights subjected the trade unions to. They elected Samuel Gompers of the Cigar Makers International Union as their first president, who served until his death in 1924. The early AFL reflected many of the Knights' traditions, including industrial unions and socialist politics. They fought for injunction reform and the 8-hour day. Within 15 years, the AFL would grow to represent millions in predominantly white, skilled craft unions that embodied business unionism. In 1935, the demands for industrial organizing would split the House of Labor and the AFL.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So a couple more names for the cabinet. You got Marcia Fudge, Congresswoman from Ohio. They've moved, hopefully going to get rid of Ben Carson as the Secretary of the Department of Housing and Urban Development, and also going to bring back something from the past, the Obama era AG, the Agricultural Secretary, Tom Vilsack, for Agricultural Secretary. Some pushback on that one a little bit, and here to share some thoughts on, well, the transition to this point, and maybe a little bit about Vilsack if we can get around to it. I've asked our good friend Jeff Hauser to come talk with us. Jeff is the executive director of the Revolving Door Project there at the Center for Economic and Policy Research. Jeff, thanks for taking time for us.
Anytime, Rick.
So thoughts on Fudge and Vilsack? Anything on your mind?
It's a little sideways. Marcia Fudge has served with distinction for a decade on the House Agricultural Committee. She's been focused on nutrition issues as well as conservation, trying to make sure that America's farmland works within a broader anti-climate change and mission. And she's just been a very diligent member of the House Agricultural Committee. And she'd been pursuing this Department of Agriculture, and she had said that, there's a stereotype that like you put the black members of your cabinet at HUD or maybe Labor or something. And now, like, flash forward a week or two later, and she's been nominated for HUD. And, I'm optimistic she'll do a good job. It's an extremely tough job. We're facing an eviction crisis in this country coming January. The situation, with homelessness, which was a problem for, altogether too many Americans already, has been heightened by the pandemic and the economic dislocation. So it's a big job. I think she's going to have to get up to speed on it. It's not her core expertise, and her core expertise is agriculture. And I think the U.S. Department of Agriculture is really powerful. It has broad implications. It has rural development authority that spans most, if not all, states in this country. And it also has a really bad history on race, a history that was not really entirely fixed by any stretch under Tom Vilsack. So it would have been really interesting to have someone like Marcia Fudge at the Department of Agriculture. And it's a little disappointing to see Vilsack return because, so far as I can tell, America's rural voters did not really seem to think Tom Vilsack did such a good job from 2008 to 2016, if you look at the decline in Democratic vote in those areas.
Yeah, but I'm looking at Marcia Fudge's district. There don't seem to be an awful lot of farms in Cleveland. So I guess you could argue that, they're saying, well, Cleveland's a more urban area. Maybe this is where she should fit. Do you think that's part of the thinking, or do you really think this is just about we're going to put the black person at HUD?
I think it's a little bit of a lot of things. I'm sure there are factors I can guess at, but don't know. And I don't think they're all going to be like problematic on a theory of race. I do think that there probably was some pushback in some corners of the party that you wanted a traditional rural person to run the Department of Agriculture. And I get it generally in the sense that obviously we need people from rural America to have prominent positions in the Biden administration. But I don't think all rural people are involved in agriculture. I think the Department of Agriculture is really important on issues related to food and food security across the country. And I don't necessarily think we need to leave the Department of Agriculture as a white Midwestern preserve, nor should we make HUD solely an urban African-American reserve. I think we should diversify thinking. So if an argument was made, like we need some prominent people in the administration from rural America, I certainly would agree with that, but I don't think it necessarily has to be the Department of Agriculture.
No, and you're right to point out the food part of it because in Cleveland, one of the poorest cities in the country, that is a major issue, food insecurity and the such. So you can make that argument, but when people think of agriculture and what the Department of Agriculture does, their mind immediately goes to the Midwest and immediately to Iowa, for me anyway.
Yeah, but I mean, like, for sure, but it's also worth noting that the Mississippi Delta is a rural area, and there have been issues of the displacement of African American farmers. The percentage of farmers in this country who are African American has been declining precipitously. It's a concerning issue. And the department, beyond the food security issues it addresses, its rural development mission includes housing issues in rural America and some rural broadband issues. And it's a very important a lot of these departments have jobs above and beyond just what the title would suggest. And so I think the title is kind of playing into the stereotypes as to who should get the job. But the reality is Vilsack did not set the earth on fire in a positive way in his 8 years. He came in with a mandate to try to take on big agriculture, and he did not succeed. And I think there's a lot of sore feelings about that.
No, it's going to be interesting. But, I said, before the election even happened, because someone asked me, what do you expect from a Biden administration? And I said, really a third Obama administration. And, bringing back a retread like Vilsack to do the same job he did during the Obama years, just kind of made me go, yeah. The only thing that, if you really want to tank the cabinet for me, you bring back Rahm Emanuel. If that happens, I'm done. I'm out.
So far as I can tell, the main person interested in Rahm Emanuel being in the cabinet is Rahm Emanuel. And
exactly.
I think Rahm is also probably smart enough to know that he's not going to get it. I mean, he'd like to. It's like, buying a lottery ticket, but he also just wants to be relevant. And I think the fact that he was not organically being considered for anything, I think that has him feeling lonely. He's making a lot of money right now, but he's kind of lost influence and prestige for some exceedingly good reasons. And I think he wants to be relevant. And I think he thinks aggressively leaking the possibility of different jobs is a way to return to relevance.
Because I'll tell you, when I saw that, I saw the report, Rahm Emanuel being considered for Department of Transportation. I almost did a backflip. Because I'm going, no, this is absolutely the wrong thing. And then I calmed down and I said, no, I don't see how that's possible after his mayoral stint. I just don't see how he's someone who can be in this administration, even if you do want to recreate a third Obama term.
Yeah. And I think in general, the overall approach of the Biden administration seems to be to find broadly liked people from the Obama administration and give them big jobs. So it's a bit of it's like a kinder, gentler Obama 3.0 is the approach. And honestly, Obama 2.0 is better in terms of the executive branch than Obama 1.0. They got a little bit better at using the executive branch's considerable authorities. And obviously, we'd like that trend to at least continue. I mean, given the size of the crises, we'd like to go better than just like small increases in performance. But I think generally speaking, what we're seeing is people who are not the type of people you would see in a Bernie or Warren administration, but the better types of people from Obama, people who see themselves as progressives, who are shifting somewhat in response to the times. So it's not a huge win, but it's definitely could be much worse, given that Biden really ran the most conservative campaign of any of the major campaigns in the primary. And Obama, in 2008, ran as a progressive. And so, I think we're doing a little bit better in 2020. I think we're doing considerably better in 2020 than in 2008, despite the winner having ran to the right of where the 2008 winner ran.
Yeah, so you're giving Biden good marks to this point then?
It's like a solid B. I mean, it's not an A. We're not seeing stars. I don't think there's anyone I'm pretty happy with Janet Yellen at Treasury. To my mind, that might be like the closest. But it's mostly been he's avoided huge errors. I mean, I have not really fully formulated my view on the Defense Department and state situation with the military industrial complex, and that it's definitely not great. It's definitely kind of a little bit too normal. So how to compare that to the past, it's a little complicated on the foreign policy side, but on the domestic policy side, I think it's like it's like a BB minus, which, again, could have been much worse.
Yeah, but a lot of my progressive friends are very angry that Bernie probably isn't even being considered for labor secretary. Elizabeth Warren, no chance at Treasury. Some of the places that solid progressives had wanted, those aren't going to happen because Biden is trying to run. I think he is trying to run a unity ticket to try and bring people together and not have any extremes.
Yeah, but I think that sometimes works to our advantage. At Health and Human Services, Gina Raimondo was basically set to get it last Wednesday, and a bunch of us kicked into overdrive and made clear what an ugly battle it would be for Gina Raimondo. And just so your listeners understand, she's the governor of Rhode Island. She got her start as a venture capitalist, and she had like a very ineffective venture capital fund that she got a lot of government money for. She then became treasurer of the state of Rhode Island, and the state of Rhode Island continued to invest in Raimondo's venture capital fund. She then became the governor, and throughout that time, she was sort of the leading figure in state government attacking pensions of state and local employees. And she brought that kind of hedge fund backed, like she threw a ton of state money at hedge funds run by people like Dan Loeb, big time right-wing donors, anti-union forces. She ran all of these like right-wing playbooks in state and local government. And occasionally she would do decent things and engage in transactional ways with progressive institutions and gain some legitimacy so that she could be renominated as governor. But like overall, just a bad person. And now we have Javier Becerra. After the left got upset with the Raimondo to HHS, we now have Javier Becerra, who is a longtime supporter of Medicare for All. He was on the relevant House Ways and Means subcommittee looking into health spending. He's got a good record on those issues. As Attorney General in California, he's gone after hospitals that are merging in order to raise prices. He wants to make the healthcare system work for people. And that's the type of senior leader you want at a place like HHS. And so, yeah, it's not perfect, but that's a big win. HHS really matters even under the best of times, and certainly matters amidst the pandemic.
Yeah, now you guys over at the Revolving Door Project have caught some people's attention because you're being honest about what you see. And I think it's important to have a fair arbiter of the people who are coming in. Someone saying, do we really want to go back to people like her and others who are going to make, the austerity business decisions or whatever. In fact, you were attacked by the Washington Post editorial board, I think Politico as well, right?
Yeah, we had a very interesting Friday afternoon and early evening. The Washington Post put up an editorial arguing that the Revolving Door Project's critiques of this guy, Jeffrey Zients, were out of bounds. The New York Times had written a piece based off of our research talking about how Jeffrey Zients, he runs a quasi-private equity long-term holding firm that bought a medical anesthesia practice. These are the types of companies that engage in surprise medical billing. You get like anesthesia, and it turns out you wake up, hopefully, and you end up with a bill because it's all of a sudden out of it. The medical anesthesia company is a different vendor than your hospital. Your hospital is in system for your insurance, and your anesthesia is not. And this is like the type of guy who was already worth 9 or 10 figures deciding to buy a company that engages in surprise billing. Like, that's not the type of business expertise we need in government. And so they wrote a piece being like, we need practical business guys who like know how to do manufacturing. And it's like, no, he knows how to manufacture numbers on a spreadsheet. He's brilliant at arbitrage and finding the laws that are not really enforced and the like. He is not a genius at making stuff work. So we got attacked for our criticism of science. And then a few hours later, a source close to the Biden administration turned us a thorn in the side of the Biden transition and asked where we'd been the last 4 years attacking the rise of fascism. And of course, like, as you well know, Rick, we've talked about many times, the Revolving Door Project is deeply opposed to fascism and did a lot, we think, to try to elevate different ways House Democrats and others could fight back on Trump corruption. And we found a lot of Trump corruption that others hadn't found. So I definitely resented the implication that we were anything other than anti-Trump. I was also attacked for having been a lobbyist in the past, which is, of course, something I'm proud of. I was a lobbyist on behalf of immigration reform, which was apparently, they thought, hypocritical that I might attack people for lobbying for Facebook or Wall Street, because, like, my God, you have in fact yourself lobbied, again, in conjunction with the SEIU and the Conference of Catholic Bishops. I fought for immigration reform. But yeah, we're making the right people upset.
And that's the good thing. And this is where, when you make the thorn in the side t-shirts, I got to have one.
We will send you one of the first ones, Rick.
Because, this is what I've been saying all along, and this is what Trump supporters don't understand. We don't have hero worship of candidates. We hold them accountable. I talk to Trump supporters and I go, who do you like? What did they do? And there's nothing. I just love, Donald. And I'm going, that's not how it is. We want good policy. We want the right people in the right place. And we're going to hold our candidates accountable for it. And what you're doing, I think, is incredibly important.
Yeah, we have allies at Demand Progress and Data for Progress that have been doing polling, and it kind of confirms the pretty common sense idea that the revolving door is pretty unpopular. People don't want government of, by, and for corporate lobbyists or corporate executives or Wall Street or Silicon Valley. That's not what people are interested in. And so to the extent to which we are making it difficult for the Biden team to bring in Wall Street pals of theirs or Silicon Valley, I would argue we're doing them a solid, that they are going to be better off politically if they make the cleanest possible break with the Trump administration. And they have to recognize that they're going to get attacked from the right. Hypocrisy is not a shield. Like, the fact that these Republicans have stood by while Trump ran the most corrupt administration of all time is not mean that Republicans are not going to attack you for having corporate cronies. Like, they're just going to do it. They're going to embrace the hypocrisy. Yep. And we need Biden to make as clear a commitment going forward as possible so that he doesn't have to litigate the past of each and every one of these potential appointees and can go on the offensive against Mitch McConnell and the Republican ideology and Republican corruption.
There you go. Jeff, I appreciate the time. As always, great stuff. Keep up the work. Keep up being the thorn in the side. I'd love to have you back again real soon.
Definitely. Take care, Rick.
Good stuff. Our good friend Jeff Hauser, Executive Director of the Revolving Door Project. Make sure you check out their website, therevolvingdoorproject.org. Quick break. Right back. Stick around.
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. Rick Smith.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1993. That was the day that President Bill Clinton signed the North American Free Trade Agreement into law. The stated aim of NAFTA was to increase trade between the United States, Mexico, and Canada. It created the largest free trade zone in the world up until that time. President Clinton declared that NAFTA would promote more growth, more equality, better preservation of the environment, and a greater possibility for world peace. Many NAFTA supporters thought that the agreement would create hundreds of thousands of new high-wage U.S. jobs. They also claimed the agreement would raise living standards in the U.S., Mexico, and in Canada. Yet many in the labor movement were deeply skeptical of these claims. Labor organized against the bill, but despite the protests, Congress voted to pass the Free Trade Agreement. In 2014, the 20th anniversary of NAFTA, the AFL-CIO released a report detailing the harmful harmful impact of the trade agreement. It noted some alarming facts, stating, while the overall volume of trade within North America due to NAFTA has increased and corporate profits have skyrocketed, wages have remained stagnant in all three countries. It also found that productivity has increased, but workers' share of these gains has decreased steadily, along with unionization rates. Current data clearly shows the damage caused by NAFTA. Nevertheless, President Obama and many in Congress have pushed for the passage of a similar trade agreement, the Trans-Pacific Partnership. This agreement would simply expand the negative impacts of NAFTA. The TPP would lead to even lower wages and continued job loss. This agreement expands special protections for firms that send U.S. jobs out of the country. It is another in a long list of trade deals that have and will continue to hurt working people.
Top regulatory officials in Trump's government keep chanting the same one-word mantra: deregulate, deregulate, deregulate. Day after day, these agency bosses have been liberating greedy business interests to do their damnedest to us consumers, workers, the environment, and even to our chicken dinner. Yes, chicken. Instead of Kentucky Fried or tacos con pollo, they're serving up chicken a la avian leukosis. That's chicken infected with a virus that produces cancerous tumors and lesions on the birds. In July, the U.S. Agriculture Department's Food Safety and Inspection Service rubber-stamped a demand by Tyson Foods and other multi-billion-dollar meat conglomerates to deregulate chicken processing rules so they can sell chickens diseased with avian leukosis for human consumption. And no, the huge brand-name marketers would not even be burdened by having to put a right-to-know label on the package so we consumers could know what we're buying. As always, the industry line is, "It's perfectly safe. Trust us." No. Their claim is that slaughterhouse line workers can simply cut out any tumors they see, then process the rest of the animal. There are two problems with this claim. First, avian leukosis can be a systemic disease passing through the blood, so slicing tumors doesn't necessarily eliminate the virus. Second, line workers don't have time to see tumors, much less remove them, since Trump's corporate-hugging regulators have also allowed poultry factories to speed up their processing lines to 175 birds per minute. This means each worker handles up to 3 chickens a second. As Lyndon Johnson used to say about such political hokum, they can't make chicken salad out of chicken shit. To learn more, go to Food and Water Watch, foodandwaterwatch.org.
Hightower's commentaries are brought to you by the Hightower Lowdown, the monthly newsletter with Hightower's take on what Wall Street and Washington are up to. For information, visit hightowerlowdown.org.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So the new reports out that the White House is talking about possibly, maybe, $600 stimulus checks, no $1,200. Even though it was reported that Trump actually wanted like $2,000 at one point. I guess this just shows how much power Mitch McConnell has in this government at this moment. But I guess 600 is better than nothing, especially as we head into the worst part of this pandemic, and as parents are going to have to stay home and do more focused on educating their children because we can't get the schools back open. Maybe once Biden comes in, like he said, the 100 million doses of the vaccine in the first 100 days, maybe we can then start talking about opening things up and back to sanity. But on the education front, so much we need to do. And here to share some thoughts on the way forward, I've asked our good friend Sari Beth Rosenberg to come talk with us. She is the Senior Education Advisor with Voters of Tomorrow. Sari, thanks for taking time for us.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
So we're really in a weird time because, most people I talk to, kids' schools are shut down. They're trying to do the whole Zoom online stuff and balance work and family and all this stuff. It's craziness.
It's absolute craziness. And there's so much back and forth based on the disease spread. So, yeah, we are really learning how to be flexible this year. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, there it is. That. Now, tell me about this organization, Voters of Tomorrow. What is it, and what do you guys do?
So this was founded by Gen Z kids I call them kids, but to me, they're adults at this point. Santiago Myers, one of the founders, but it's basically a team of Gen Z kids. Their goal is to educate and engage young people because they're the largest voting bloc right now, up and coming largest voting bloc. And it's a nonpartisan organization. So, which is, I'm really happy to be a part of as a teacher. And I'm so dedicated to civics with my students. So I was really happy to get involved and be like their honorary wannabe Gen Z member, but I'm really Gen X, I think.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
But it's one of those things where you go, you're the old person in the room, and you're not old, but you're now really the kind of the old person in the room. You're kind of like the house mom at this point, right?
Yeah, I see myself as kind of like the auntie. That makes me feel a little less old, but I mean, I could be their mom. So, but I feel like because I am so, and this is such a cliche at this point because people keep saying this, but I will say it too. I am so inspired by Gen Z right now. And I have been for a while because that's who I've been teaching. But one thing I kept talking about even up to a couple of years ago was there needs to be, we can't just keep saying, Gen Z, you're going to save us. I'm really pushing for an intergenerational symbiotic relationship there. So when they asked me to join this, I said, absolutely, because I really don't think I think that they can lead the way, but I think they need some of us older folk to partner with them on that because
No, you're right.
Yeah.
No, I mean, if you buy into the whole fourth turning argument that every fourth generation is the greatest generation, well, here they are, and they're going to have to save and clean up all the mess that the last three generations have thrown out. So we might as well get them prepared early, right?
Right. And I'm happy to help. I mean, there also has been a trope that Gen Z was raised by Gen X. So it's kind of like we were, I think it's a cliche, but we've been considered the slacker generation, but I think we've been pretty busy. But, and you can tell by how Gen Z is so activated. They're listening to us. And now they're doing something about it.
Yeah, and that's the important part of this. So, and they need advisors to keep them on the straight and narrow because look, this generation right now that's in school at this moment, they're having to deal with things that we could have never imagined. I mean, this complete shutdown, a major destruction of their education. And look, I know teachers are trying the best they can, and I know we're doing the best you can, but they got a lot of catching up to do.
They do. And that's been we've been remote this whole time, even when we've been doing hybrid, the kids are remote for the most part. And the focus at our school and my major focus is engaging them, even when we're studying something from the past, engaging them and reminding them that they can make a difference now, even if they're sitting in their respective homes and apartments. And I actually got some of my students already involved with Voters of Tomorrow, and they helped out with some get out the vote efforts that they were behind, so partnering with. So I've just been finding different pathways to really take that enthusiasm that these young people have. I've never seen them my students more politically motivated and excited to get involved in civics. So I guess aside from being able to be in a classroom with them, I love the idea of engaging them, with these different materials that these groups are putting out.
Yeah, I think back to my high school civics teacher, and he was often dismayed that our class, the slacker generation, as you said, they weren't all that engaged and all that interested in the topic whatsoever. And we still did. I think I got a robust, education around government and civics. But he was frustrated by it. I can't imagine what kind of excitement he would have in this moment.
I've been teaching. I know it's hard to believe, but I've been teaching for almost 2 decades because I started when I was 14. Uh-huh. That's what I would tell my students. They're like, "There's no way." I'm like, "I know. I'm the Doogie Howser of teaching." But I definitely have found that, when I started, I taught through 3 administrations now: the Bush administration, the Obama administration, and then 45, let's say. And I will say unequivocally that these past couple of years, I've never seen more activated young people. So that's one silver lining in this craziness, I guess. But I remember just being like, trying to get them excited about current events for the past 2 decades, and really having 1 or 2 kids biting. On the first day, I decided to frame the school year with a reading with John Lewis's Final Letter to America that was the op-ed in the New York Times.
Right.
I wasn't quite sure, it's virtual. I have never met them before. They're all avatars on my screen. That chat box lit up when we started talking about what America means to them, what they think needs to change in this country, how they want to change the country. When I used to ask that question every other year, it was like 1 or 2 kids were really into it. I will say that I wish I was in a classroom, all year, but at that particular moment, these kids were just chomping at the bit to talk about the future of America and where they wanted to go. So I don't want to sound Pollyanna-ish. It's a really crappy year for everyone, but I can feel their excitement over politics and civics. So it's palpable, even through a screen.
So when we hear people say that, they're hopeful for the future because of the generation coming up behind, you'd side with that.
I would absolutely side with that, but I don't want to put it all on them. I want it to be intergenerational. And that's why of course I do. I'm a teacher, so I want to see my part in there. But I think we have some things we've messed up a ton for them, but I do think we have, I don't want to just rest it all on their shoulders. And so that's what I'm trying to model as the advisor in the room.
Yeah, that's good. So what issues do you find that generation is most focused on? Now, I go back to your first term. You talked about you taught under the Bush administration, and I got to imagine the war was front and center there. That was,
yes.
Because their lives were literally on the line at that moment. What seems to be the main focus right now? I'm sure the virus is front and center, but what seems to be the main focus?
I teach in New York City at the High School for Environmental Studies. So climate change, climate justice is number one for my students. And right alongside that, civil rights, civil liberties. I'm not sure about the rest of the country, but I'm in my own little silo. But I do feel like when I talk to teachers across the country, it seems like those are the 2 top issues. Climate change, and also I think finding ways so that they're not riddled with student debt after college. So, stuff along those lines. They're worried. They don't want to be in the same position that millennials are in terms of like student debt and not even being able to afford a home. But I find climate change is something that I always kind of wanted to get them more excited about, because that's the name of my school's the Environmental Studies High School. But now they're authentically interested in it. And of course, after this summer, Black Lives Matter and really finally changing the criminal justice system and making it more equitable.
Yeah, an awful lot of stuff to do. But on the student debt part of it, there's talk of Joe Biden, forgiving somewhere up to $50,000 worth of student debt, which I'm not absolutely opposed to.
Yeah.
But it can't be that alone. The idea that we're just going to say you guys are the winners. Congratulations, you got the money at the time when we were giving it out, and then to do nothing going forward so that the next generation gets stiffed like the last one did.
Right.
I kind of have a problem with that.
I do too. I am not an economist. I don't know the right solution, but that does trouble me because it's kind of kicking the can down the road, right? I don't know that's not my expertise. I don't know what the answer is, but I know it will definitely relieve a lot of young people that I know right now who are in college or about to enter college or graduate school. But yeah, it's not going to solve it. So that's something to think about for sure.
No, at some point we've got to talk about refunding higher education the way we have done in past generations. And I've talked about this before. I have a friend who went to through the University of Michigan undergrad, through the University of Michigan Law School. And, this is back in the late 60s, mind you, but worked a crummy minimum wage job, had a jalopy of a car, lived in a 1-bedroom apartment, and left the University of Michigan Law School debt-free. She was able to pay her tuition to go through because the tuition was that reasonable that you could pay the tuition full freight on a crummy minimum wage job. And the minimum wage wasn't eroded away to nothing like it is virtually today. So we have a lot of systemic problems that need to be addressed for us to get to the point to where, we're not going to load kids with a lifetime of debt.
Yeah. And I think this pandemic has exposed the system-wide problems that you and I have been talking about for a long time to a lot of people who weren't really paying attention. I also think we need to, reimagine what we mean by public school or by education in general. It's definitely destabilized me in terms of like my benchmarks and goals were standardized tests because that's how the system was set up. And in our last staff meeting, our administrators were like, we don't even know if there's a state exam. Why don't we just focus on student engagement, meeting them where they are, all the things that we always talk about, but without stressing out about these programs-based assessments, right? So I do think we need to both rethink the way what we're charging kids to go for their advanced degrees. And I also need to rethink with the advent of technology, how we're training them. I mean, is these multiple choice tests and all that kind of, that's not even rigorous at this point. It's memorization. So,
no, you're right. And it's multiple guess was always the easiest way to, because there were always two choices. There's never going to be those. So you're down to, okay, flip a coin. But here's the thing. Here's what my concern is. And maybe you've got a thought on this.
Yeah.
As a teacher, at the beginning of this pandemic, my concern was, your local public schools done now. The brick and mortar schools that are in your neighborhood gone. Everything's now going to go online. The cyber charter world is now front and center. Do you find the kids that you're dealing with thinking that's the future, or have they repelled to the point to where we definitely don't want that? We need our local public schools.
I hope so. I mean, there's some forces who are saying that remote learning and what's going on with unions and stuff regarding that is going to destroy public education or whatever. I disagree. That's all I'll say about that. I think that it's reminding everyone how important public education is, how important, it's so weird to use this term, but brick and mortar education classrooms. Like, I never even thought about a classroom being virtual until last spring, but even using that term makes me giggle, like an actual classroom. Kids, we all miss it. I mean, and I also learned recently the reason why kids aren't turning on their screens is because they're just gonna be too distracted because they're teenagers. They're going to be too distracted looking at themselves the whole time. That's why they don't turn them on. I thought it was I thought it was just so endearing and sweet. I mean, it doesn't help the fact that I feel like I'm talking to just nobody. And then every once in a while, someone will respond. It's like so awkward. And the kids feel awkward for me. So I think it's I think everyone can't wait to be back in a classroom. I think it's reminded everyone how much in all facets of society, how much we took it for granted that we could just see people without a screen,
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I'm now thinking back, to my days in high school. If I had to stare myself in the face for the whole time, oh my God, that would be horrible. And also, I can't do it now.
No, I'm looking at myself now and I'm like, oh God, I keep seeing my hair get bigger and bigger. And so could you imagine if I had, when I was in high school, I mean, let's just say there were some pimples on my face.
Yeah.
I'd be staring at I'd be like this the whole time. And also I record all the classes because there's kids right now who have to miss class because they're working and providing for their families or babysitting. It's a global pandemic. I don't know if people have forgotten. People have lost their jobs. So I record all the classes with the kids' permission. And so I have to go, sometimes I go through them to remember what I did that day to send to a kid who missed it. And I have to see my face and I'm like, oh God, why was, I'm like up close to the screen like this. And I'm like, oh God, why don't they tell me? It's so now I understand why they don't want to have their cameras on. It makes sense now.
Yeah. Like you're just a big giant head.
I know. I keep having to remind myself, back away from the camera, Miss Rosenberg. And no one says anything because I'm leaning over it, reading stuff. It's awful. I wish it wasn't recorded now, but it's for the kids. They can look up my nostrils now.
Yeah, I mean, because I think about that myself. If I do a Zoom call on my laptop, and I'm looking at something, all you're seeing is my nose, which is bad. But I'm happy to hear that this is something that isn't going to be, hopefully, not going to be on past the pandemic. Once we do get people vaccinated, once we're on the other side of this horrible next couple of months, that life might come back somewhat. To some bit of normalcy.
I think it will. I mean, there's studies that show that writing down notes on paper help you remember stuff better. And kids aren't doing that. I mean, they are, and taking pictures of it and uploading it on Google Classroom for me. It's just not the same. I mean, I miss getting their papers and writing in my red or pink pen, my notes. I just don't think you can replace that. It's just, I want to believe that we are going to be reinvigorated to go back in real life learning and, add some tech to it. I've definitely learned some fun tricks with technology, but I just want to sit on the desk and not even have the smartboard on and just be like, let's discuss the Mexican-American War. What do you think of that? Here's a map. Here's a map. That's it. Let's just talk about it.
Let's go at it. The website, votersoftomorrow.org. We'll get links out on social media. If folks wanted to join, is there a way to join and be part of this?
Yeah. So one cool thing that I wanted to update you on is that the New York City Department of Education is partnering with them, with the civic. New York City has an amazing civics program, Civics for All program. And so they're partnering. I think it's official now. They're partnering with them with some curriculum. And the goal for Voters of Tomorrow is to partner with other school districts across the country. And you can also join, if anyone with kids is listening or watching, students can set up their own chapters at their schools. One of my students did that already in September. So it's all about grassroots and getting it out there and just getting that civics education out there, because they are the voters of tomorrow, right?
There you go. And they are the hope of that maybe our country won't be as crazy as I fear it's going to be after looking at some of these MAGA folks who, the one guy said he's going to do everything to keep Donald Trump in office. And I'm going,
I saw that.
Can you define everything?
Everything encompasses a lot.
Yeah.
So, but this is the biggest voting block coming up, and they made a big difference in the 2020 election. So they will do everything to make sure that we elect the right people in 2022 and 2024.
There you go. Suri, I appreciate you taking time for us. Always great talking with you.
Great talking with you too.
Our good friend Suri Rosenberg. She is the senior education advisor there with Voters of Tomorrow, votersoftomorrow.org, the website. Make sure you check that out. And like she said, if you want to start a local chapter in your school, if there is someone of that age listening, by all means, or encourage your kids, by all means do. Quick break, right back. Stick around. Listen to The Rick Smith Show.
Saving work in America, one show at a time. The Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1941. That was the day 18 supporters of the Socialist Workers' Party were sentenced in the first Smith Act trial. Earlier that summer, 29 militants had been targeted and arrested for their leadership of the events in Minneapolis during the 1930s. They led the 1934 Teamsters strike that made Minneapolis a union town, successfully confronted the fascist Silver Shirts in 1938, and led a WPA strike the following year. By 1941, federal agents were raiding SWP offices in Minneapolis and St. Paul, seizing boxes of documents, books, pamphlets, and other materials. The prosecution alleged the 29 had conspired to advocate the violent overthrow of the federal government. The defendants insisted that advocating class struggle to achieve a peaceful transition to socialism was not the equivalent of a violent overthrow. They added the trial was a government witch hunt bent on suppressing their First Amendment rights. 6 were released, another 5 were acquitted, but the remaining 18 were sentenced to between 12 and 16 months in jail. Dozens of CIO unions, including the UAW, the USWA, the URW, and the UE, all rallied to the defense of the convicted militants. The ACLU, central in the defense case, now mounted the appeals campaign. They failed to overturn the convictions, and the 18 surrendered to authorities 2 years later to begin serving their sentences. For historian Donna Haverty-Stack, the case showed how far the Roosevelt administration went to prosecute political dissent, even to the point of targeting the labor-liberal left. The act would be repealed in 1952. And hundreds of convictions under the act would finally be reversed as unconstitutional by 1957.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
You know, I stop and I think about that. If I imagine, you know, if you had to go to school and that was the reality that, and I never thought about that, of looking yourself in the face the whole day. You know, I guess for the vain, it would be okay. And I remember the girls in class always, you know, coiffing their hair or doing whatever they do, put on the makeup. I guess it would be easier for that. But for those of us who weren't, well, you know, all that decent looking, that'd be just kind of like a painful reminder. Terrible. I'll have to ask my kids if they do that. Because, you know, the reality is, you know, as we've been saying, you know, it's really a bizarre time. And I worry, you know, as a parent, I worry that what they're getting isn't up to snuff, isn't going to be, you know, what they need going forward, and how much catching up do they have to do, how much remedial work is going to have to go in by the next teachers. Fortunately, my kids are young enough. My son's in 9th grade, my daughter's in 6th grade, so they've got a little time to be catching up. But, you know, imagine if, you know, this is your senior year going into college, and, you know, you lose your entire senior year like my oldest daughter did, or at least half of it. You know, it's wow. I mean, it's just one of these weird kind of times. And, you know, I'm hoping that we as a society realize what's going on and do the investments that we need to be doing to help them. I would hate to see, you know, the studies that are going to come out in 20 years about how this pandemic stunted the entire this entire class for their whole rest of their lives, and they're going to have these horrible outcomes. Because not just having the year and a half of education the way it's been, but the budgets that are going to come out next year that are going to slash and burn education funding. Because understand, here in Pennsylvania, if they don't get some money into the coffers, if there isn't some drive to get some cash into the box, there's nowhere else to slash and burn. Education and human services, man, that's where it goes. So we're going to be pitting kids against granny. So are we going to take care of the old and the infirmed, or we're going to help the kids? That's the choice we're going to get. That's the Hunger Games that's coming, and why I'm so angry at this administration and Mitch McConnell more than anybody. Because I've said before, I truly believe Donald Trump would have signed anything. You'd have put anything in front of him, he'd have signed it. Just because he wants to have the attention, he wants to have the Rose Garden ceremony and people saying nice things about him. I fear that, you know, come the next budget crisis, you know, over the summer here where I'm at, that, you know, education gets just severely hacked. Because, you know, states don't have the ability like the federal government does to just print money out of air. Most states have balanced budget amendments, which again is why all of those, you don't hear many conservatives right now running around talking about we need a balanced budget amendment. Can you imagine if the T-Twits would have gotten their wet dream wish and we would have gotten a balanced budget amendment rammed through? What would have happened during this pandemic? Can you imagine? Can you imagine, for all my gold nuts, if we were still on the gold standard and you wouldn't have the ability to expand money into the economy? Can you imagine what it would look like? The kind of bust that we would have had, the kind of mass suffering and mass pain and homelessness and foreclosures and all that stuff. Let that sink in for a bit. I'm not a big fan of borrowing money when we don't need to, but right now we need to. I'm not a big fan of borrowing money to give to rich people, not at all. In fact, which is why I think the billionaires, the tax act that we talked about yesterday on the program is so vital. The idea that the people who have pocketed $1 trillion from the beginning of this pandemic have seen their wealth increase by $1 trillion. Our billionaire class, while millions of people have lost their jobs. Millions more are facing evictions and foreclosures. They've lost their health insurance. They've burned through their whatever savings they've had. They're dipping into their 401ks as we speak just to keep food on the table and a roof on their head. And you've got these 600 who have seen their wealth go up by $1 trillion. And we're not going to tax them and use that money in a way that's going to benefit society by funding education, by funding state and local government so we can keep the cops and the fire departments and everything else our local governments do. That's what Mitch McConnell and the Republican senators are holding up. And it's going to be ugly next year. And it's going to be really, really tough. And it's going to all fall onto the most vulnerable areas. And education being one of those areas. Scary, scary times. Going to take a quick break. When we come back and talk a little bit about the ACA open enrollment ends in about a week. We're going to get some thoughts on how you can sign up for that if you haven't already. Quick break, right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
Waving the flag of freedom for people, not corporations. Rick Smith.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1886. That was the day 38 tradesmen met in Columbus, Ohio, to found the American Federation of Labor. There was an urgent need to form a new national organization for skilled workers. The Knights of Labor had organized workers regardless of skill. They included women and African Americans among their ranks. But they were rocked by a sharp and swift decline that year. There was an anti-labor backlash after the Haymarket incident the previous spring. Many tradesmen were looking to form a different kind of federation than the Knights had offered. Julie Green, author of Pure and Simple Politics, states the new AFL differed from the Knights of Labor on 3 core issues. First, these trade unionists were less concerned with the broad social reforms the Knights promoted. Instead, they wanted to work toward the economic concerns of their members. They didn't like the mixed assemblies the Knights insisted upon, which often included non-workers. Second, the craftsmen hoped for full autonomy of the trade unions within a loose federation. They didn't like the centralized structure of the Knights and the dominant role Terence Powderly played. Finally, they didn't like the jurisdictional subordination the Knights subjected the trade unions to. They elected Samuel Gompers of the Cigar Makers International Union as their first president, who served until his death in 1924. The early AFL reflected many of the Knights' traditions, including industrial unions and socialist politics. They fought for injunction reform and the 8-hour day. Within 15 years, the AFL would grow to represent millions in predominantly white, skilled craft unions that embodied business unionism. In 1935, the demands for industrial organizing would split the House of Labor and the AFL.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
I gotta tell you, I'm sure glad that we've got Senator Ron Johnson from Wisconsin, the Republican, who today had a hearing on alternative medicines. While Trump is having his vaccine summit, which nobody really understands what he was doing or what executive order he actually signed. He signed something. Nobody seems to know what it was, but he took credit for it, whatever it was. But you got Ron Johnson going, well, maybe we need to be talking about alternative medicines. And right away, I'm thinking, the silver stuff, that's coming back, hydroxychloroquine, I'm sure that's coming back. And they did. And they brought up a whole bunch of other stuff used for, all kinds of bizarre ailments as the super cures. And I'm going, can we just get the vaccine? Can we get rid of all of you witch doctors and poison potion folks? Can we do a little bit of that and actually get some, medicine and maybe be able to, pay for it? make sure that people can get the care they need when they need and not go broke. And here to share some thoughts on maybe how we get to that point, or at least from the short term, I've asked Laura Packard to come talk with us. She's a stage 4 cancer survivor and the founder of Healthcare Voices. Laura, thanks for taking time for us.
Thank you for having me.
So what do you think? Snake oil, can we go back to leeches? Maybe leeches would help with coronavirus. What do you think?
I think thoughts and prayers is not a COVID-19 pandemic strategy. And I think that alternative medicine should be filed along with alternative facts.
I'm right there with you. And, the sad reality is, and this is one of those sad moments. I have a relative who passed recently because of the coronavirus. And sadly, he was a big Trump supporter. And it was just one of these horrible moments where, he was an older gentleman. And, it's just one of those things where, if we could just find some middle of the road kind of fact stuff, I'm right there with you. It's crazy. So here we are, days away from the end of open enrollment. Tell me about it.
Well, open enrollment is going on right now through Tuesday, December 15th in most states. Some states have extensions and run a little longer, but the important date is Tuesday, December 15th, and you can start shopping for health insurance at healthcare.gov. And even if there is a separate state exchange for your state, healthcare.gov will route you to the right place.
Yeah, now Pennsylvania is the state that expanded Medicaid, and you can go to healthcare.gov and it will take you to the Pennsylvania state site. And there are still a number, not as many as there used to be, but a number of navigators that can help you get through the process and make sure that you're doing the right stuff. And we're in this moment where you have an administration who is dead set against the Affordable Care Act, or the dreaded Obamacare, because they are the same, folks. I know it's hard to believe, but they are the same. And they've done virtually nothing, in my view, to promote the fact that the open enrollment period is happening and to help people get the insurance that they need when we've had so many people lose their jobs and ultimately lose their insurance.
Exactly. And the money that we're paying for, part of the premiums for your Affordable Care Act plan was to go to marketing to help spread the word about this. And so they've cut the marketing budget. They've done everything they can to sabotage the Affordable Care Act, but it's still here and we're still here too.
Yeah, even though there's still that Supreme Court case that's still lingering, although I feel a little bit better, maybe not a lot. I'm not optimistic. I'm not bright and sunny, but I'm feeling a little better than I was before I heard some of the questioning. Have you followed the case?
Yes, and it's a little difficult to tell how they're going to vote because sometimes they'll do devil's advocate and they'll ask questions that don't necessarily determine how they're going to rule. But the important part is that the Supreme Court ruling will happen next spring or maybe next summer. So that is several months away. And if you don't have health insurance, you should go to healthcare.gov now and get covered.
Now, there's a lot of people I know, and I've spoken to a number of people over the last several years who, literally the Affordable Care Act has been a lifesaver. And, you have an interesting story as well, right?
The Affordable Care Act saved my life. About 3 years ago, I walked into a doctor's office with a nagging cough and walked out with a stage 4 cancer diagnosis. And I never could have been able to afford the treatment that I needed to be in remission today without good insurance through the Affordable Care Act. I'm self-employed, and before the Affordable Care Act, I had junk insurance. If I still had a junk insurance policy today, I would be bankrupt or dead.
And, sadly, Trump has brought that junk insurance back. These short-term plans that, you get a nice slick brochure and a nice card to put in your wallet, but it doesn't cover much. What we used to call catastrophic plans. And even then, they still don't cover anything.
Exactly. So if you are working with a broker, make sure that they are showing you all of your options, and you can backstop that by going to healthcare.gov yourself and doing the shopping. There are some brokers that are great. I work with somebody here in Colorado that he helps talk me through all my options and the best policies for my situation. But not all brokers will do that. And so just make sure that the policies you're looking at go beyond just the initial sticker price, and make sure that they have the coverage that you're going to need.
Now, see, this is one of those crazy moments where I'm sorry, I don't know that I want to be in a position where I have to, give up one thing for another, and I want to, which plan is specifically tailored to my needs right now, because my needs may change tomorrow. Now, I'm fortunate. I have probably the best healthcare coverage any person in this country can have at this moment. I've got good Teamster Union insurance. When I got my hip replaced, it cost me $130 out of pocket. That's it. I didn't worry about the insurance. I didn't worry about if it was covered. I didn't worry about any of that. I worried about getting well. And I want that for everyone. And while the Affordable Care Act and the policies in there have some problems, it's still a step in the right direction to getting us the kind of care we need, so we don't go, well, I don't really have cancer as a family history, but heart disease I should cover. It makes no sense to me. You should get coverage. You should be protected. And if you get sick in the wealthiest country in the history of civilization at its wealthiest moment, you should get the care you need.
Exactly. And nobody knows what's going to happen tomorrow. And of the millions of Americans going through COVID-19 right now, nobody knows what kind of long-term effects they're going to have and what kind of care they or you or I are going to need in the future. So everybody needs health insurance. And I wish that our elected officials were working on making healthcare more affordable and available to everybody, instead of spending their time sniping at the Affordable Care Act and trying to take away what little healthcare we have.
I mean, those years should have been, the years of the Obama term and into the Trump years should have been tweaking it, making it better, making it more affordable, doing some of the things that I agree with the conservatives on, things that should be addressed. Surprise billing, something absolutely should be addressed. But we haven't done any of that stuff. So we've been kind of like stuck in time, stuck in 2010, and, sadly going backwards. Do you see a way forward?
Well, I am hopeful that President-elect Joe Biden has promised to make healthcare more available and affordable to everybody. I spoke with him at the Democratic National Convention. I was a part of the healthcare panel, and he promised us a public option. So I think we absolutely need to give those insurance companies some competition. But it all comes down to what happens next month in Georgia. We have got to elect pro-healthcare senators in Georgia, or else we're looking at Mitch McConnell's agenda. And we know what that is because we've just seen several years of it.
No, you're absolutely right. But, I look at your situation as someone who's self-employed, and I went through it myself when I was self-employed, having to find coverage somewhere. Unfortunately, we were able to get an ACA plan, and it was nowhere near the healthcare that I have now. And as I said, I want that for everyone. But it was that lifeline. Fortunately, we didn't need it. But if we did, thank goodness it was there. For me, this is one of the arguments I've always made. Get away from the employer-based healthcare system and get into a public option scenario, a national system, so that people like you, people like me, people like our listeners can grab that entrepreneurial spirit and run with their passions, run with what excites them to do, instead of showing up at a job because, well, I don't have a choice. I got to get the health insurance.
Exactly.
I love those answers. I love when I'm exactly right. Because, at the end of this is one of those moments where, we could do so much as a country and should be doing these kind of things. Now, part of what you do as the founder of Healthcare Voices is to amplify other people's voices. I'm curious, are there stories, and look, you've got a whopper of one. Are there stories that stick in your head? Do you go, wow, this is something that I should share? Any of those?
Sure. Well, I talk to people every day that have healthcare stories, struggling through the broken healthcare system we have in this country. And one of my friends, Lauren, is a breast cancer survivor and a small business owner in Atlanta, Georgia. And so she's paying very close attention to this election. And it's people like Lauren that we need to vote for every chance we get, because if we're not paying enough attention, if we just reelect the same old people every time, they go to Washington, D.C., and then all they do is do things like attack the Affordable Care Act instead of moving us forward. So for Lauren and for me and for everybody out there that has pre-existing conditions or ever could have a pre-existing condition, we need to vote better people into office now.
And that's the message for Georgia. And that was the message, a couple of months ago. And that was the message, 4 years ago. That's been the message for a while. And I keep hoping at some point that we wake up to it. And maybe, and I keep putting a lot of hope in we, the American people, waking up from this pandemic and going, wow, we just lived through something really horrible. Let's make sure we don't have to do that again.
I would hope, but the fact that we're worst in the world on the pandemic, that we've lost more Americans than any other country has lost its people, and yet 70 million people voted for more of the same. So there's a disconnect there that for whatever reason, people see what's around them and what we're going through and either are denying that it's happening or deciding they want more of it.
It's absolutely crazy. So to wrap things up, healthcare.gov, sign up for the Affordable Care Act. There are plenty of plans there. It's not very hard, is it?
No, it can take a little bit of time because you might need to know your income from last year to figure out if you qualify for credits or not. But it's absolutely worth taking a few minutes to check it out. Even if in the past, maybe you couldn't afford a plan, check it out this year and see. I know that the policies available to me actually dropped a little bit in price this year. So it's always worth at least taking the time to check out your options.
There you go. The website, healthcare.gov. Make sure you check that out. Only another week to go. Next Tuesday, I guess, the final day. But don't procrastinate. Do it soon. Laura, I appreciate you taking time for us.
Thank you.
Good stuff. Appreciate the time. Laura Packard, stage 4 cancer survivor, founder, Healthcare Voices. You can follow her on Twitter. We'll get links on how you can do that on our social media pages. Quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
Saving work in America, one show at a time. The Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1886. That was the day 38 tradesmen met in Columbus, Ohio, to found the American Federation of Labor. There was an urgent need to form a new national organization for skilled workers. The Knights of Labor had organized workers regardless of skill. They included women and African Americans among their ranks. But they were rocked by a sharp and swift decline that year. There was an anti-labor backlash after the Haymarket incident the previous spring. Many tradesmen were looking to form a different kind of federation than the Knights had offered. Julie Green, author of Pure and Simple Politics, states the new AFL differed from the Knights of Labor on 3 core issues. First, these trade unionists were less concerned with the broad social reforms the Knights promoted. Instead, they wanted to work toward the economic concerns of their members. They didn't like the mixed assemblies the Knights insisted upon, which often included non-workers. Second, the craftsmen hoped for full autonomy of the trade unions within a loose federation. They didn't like the centralized structure of the Knights and the dominant role Terence Powderly played. Finally, they didn't like the jurisdictional subordination the Knights subjected the trade unions to. They elected Samuel Gompers of the Cigar Makers International Union as their first president, who served until his death in 1924. The early AFL reflected many of the Knights' traditions, including industrial unions and socialist politics. They fought for injunction reform and the 8-hour day. Within 15 years, the AFL would grow to represent millions in predominantly white, skilled craft unions that embodied business unionism. In 1935, the demands for industrial organizing would split the House of Labor and the AFL.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
They got the website healthcare.gov. Make sure you check that out. If you're if you're out of work, unemployed, no insurance, it is a good option. When I was self-employed, I had it for a couple of years, and look, they're a little bit higher deductible plans, but oddly enough, competitive with most employer plans. I found that to be remarkable as I talk to people about their health insurance, and as I said, I have Teamster health insurance, which is union negotiated and administered. And when I had my hip replaced, $130. That's all I paid out of pocket. And it's one of those things that I, having been so fortunate throughout my work life to have good health insurance, take for granted that everyone has the same thing. I for years took it for granted that everyone had something similar, because when I started working, you went to different places and they all had similar plans. They were all somewhere in that same, when you got sick, you went to the doctor and you got the care you needed. There were no networks. There were no, administered doctors. There were no co-pays. There was none of that stuff, back when I first started working. And just over these 30 years, you've seen this incredible cost shifting from insurance companies and the employers onto the back of the workforce. And, as healthcare costs continue to rise, and it's one of those things where you go, it's because, in my view, we've privatized a huge part of it. We've put profit motive into the education system, or into the education too, but into the healthcare system. So we got to turn a profit because we've got hedge funds running hospitals. We've got, I think about, the former Tennessee Senator, Bill Frist. His family owned something like $10 billion worth of hospitals. And they weren't in it for the good of the country. They weren't in it for the benevolence of society. They weren't in it because they were good people. They were in it because they wanted to make money. And, this is one of those things where you go, I always thought hospitals were to take care of people, not to fleece them. And I've said I would love to go back to community-run, community-owned hospitals where our tax dollars fund the local hospitals. I don't want, ownerships per se of the doctors and the care facilities, but there's got to be something better than what we're seeing. And I got people say, well, but Rick, we've got the best technology. Well, we've always had good technology because as a country, we've invested in it. And I would like some return on our investment. Too many times we spend taxpayer dollars on drugs and on procedures and on things that end up being, patented, and then we end up being fleeced for decades to come. Our tax dollars, our investment should be rewarded, at least by having somewhat affordable drug prices and affordable health care. If other countries can figure out how to do it at a significantly lower price and cover everybody, we should be able to do that too. This is where I go, if we truly are exceptional, and I know a lot of people love that frame, that American exceptionalism. If we truly are exceptional, we can figure this out. We can ensure that every person, when they get sick, because what's amazing to me is people are now going, well, how are we going to pay for the vaccine? If we've got 100 million doses of it, how are we going to pay for it? How are people going to be able to afford to go and have the vaccine administered? And we're still not even sure we're going to have to, if we have to pay for the vaccine, or if the federal government's already paid for it, or, how much it's going to be for the doctors. And what if you don't have a doctor? It's insane. And we're saying that we want people to get it, but now we're going to put a price point on it, which is a barrier to getting care. Because understand why they started with the copays. They started with the copays because, and it's one of those Republican frames that I despise. It's so you have skin in the game. You got to really decide if you're sick enough to go to the doctor to part with that $20, $30, $40, $50. I had someone tell me to go to the emergency room. It's like $300. I mean, that's a major investment. So at 3:00 in the morning, you wake up and your kid's having, some kind of an attack. You've now got to decide, is this bad enough that they're going to be admitted? Or should I wait till 7:00 in the morning when I can maybe call my local doctor and not have to pay the $300? I mean, this is the kind of choices that people have because we've got a crap healthcare system. And I've yet to meet a working person who goes, no, this is how it should be. It's perfect the way it is. And I love the frame of, well, people love their employer-based healthcare. Yeah, I love my employer-based healthcare too. I do. But I'm cognizant of the fact that if I lose the job, I lose the healthcare. That's the dirty little secret that they never tell you. If you get sick and you can't work anymore, guess what? No more healthcare. And good luck trying to continue funding it yourself, because COBRA, while entitling you to 18 months of it, doesn't entitle it to be affordable for you to have for 18 months. So you end up paying, $15, $18, $2,000 a month for what you had, which you loved a lot when you had a job. And I think right now, with so many people losing their jobs because of the virus and ultimately losing their insurance, maybe there's a moment where we can start, pushing for better policies, better ideas. A public option should have been the minimum back in 2010. I was screaming about it back then. The minimum should be a public option. Open up Medicare, affix a price to it, let me buy into it. If you don't want Medicare for all, do the Buttigieg things, Medicare for people who want it. Let them compete like anybody else. Because look, the right should love this. Because the right, they're the big, choice people, right? I should be able to choose between that crummy, horrible government health care and this wonderful, shiny, happy, new kind of employer-based care that I lose when I lose my job. I should have the choice. But they won't give you that. Because they know, ultimately, you open up Medicare to people and they get affordable health care that pays the bills, that gives you the peace of mind and the security that if your kid falls and breaks a leg in a playground, that you're not going to go broke, you're going to go that way. I think about myself, and again, I'll be the first one to tell you, I am extremely fortunate that I have never had to worry about health care. I am extremely fortunate that I've always had a job that provided the best health care you can find. So the time when my daughter fell off the monkey bars at the playground and broke her arm, my thought was not, oh my God, this is going to break me. My thought was, how do I get her to the place where it's going to stop the pain the fastest? How do I get her the care that she needs right now? I wasn't going, gee, which hospital's got broken arms on sale this week? I wasn't flipping through the penny clipper or any of that stuff. I went to the closest place I could get to. That's the kind of security we need for people. And I'm struggling with why. And there's a bunch of reasons, and I'm sure I know what most of them are. But I'm struggling with why the average everyday working person wouldn't go, that makes sense. We need to have an option outside of what's been handed to us. I know probably 100 people who tomorrow, if healthcare wasn't a problem, would quit their jobs, would start doing something that they love, something they're passionate about. Throw out their shingle and, repair engines or cut grass or, whatever their passion is. That entrepreneurial spirit, we're told, that burns in the belly of every American. that would be unleashed. And that's probably one of the main reasons why we won't see a national health care plan. Because employers know that if they have to compete with people following their passions or being locked in to a crappy job because they need the health care, that's the only reason I can think of why GM or any of these big companies don't push for a national health care plan to get health care off of their back. They're in the business of making cars or any business, whatever widget or whatnot that they make. That's their business, not administering health care or pensions or any of that stuff. It's quite remarkable to me. And finally, Michael Flynn, his case is closed. Well, it's a moot point at this point. Trump pardoned him, but I love the fact that the judge said that, look, this doesn't necessarily mean that Flynn is innocent of the charges that he was alleged to have violated. He's not innocent. He's just not guilty. And I think there's a huge difference. And that's one of those stains that will follow someone like Flynn, and rightly so. Anyway, going to be another interesting couple of days. Looking forward to the next few. We'll see what kind of executive order Trump maybe signs tomorrow to get some attention. But if you missed any of today's program, thericksmithshow.com, that's where you go to get the podcast. The Rick Smith Show app on the smartphone. Take the program on the go wherever you go. And as always, you can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Thanks so much for being here. We'll see you back here next time.